thing that I was interested in with the creative process, though, I mean, the crowdfunding and its discontents are, a hugely important context in all of this, because that's the world we live in. However, what about the process of writing? And I've been doing a lot of consulting for Adept Play for some years now. And one of the things I've been talking about, and I'm curious about your thoughts on this, is that, and I've actually been kind of blunt about it, which is that if you start writing as introductory pitch for the game, that you're writing your book and you're writing you're writing it as your model audience is this person who doesn't know it, doesn't get it, might not want to do it. In fact, you can work yourself into thinking that you're even writing to a hostile audience that you have to appease. And but the point is that you're really thinking of it as writing what someone else is going to read. Yeah. And if you start in on that before you're done actually designing, I think you'll forget to finish designing and just work up that product instead. And so
I feel torn on that.
Yeah, tell me more about that.
Really torn on that. So when I've started games, they've kind of started out as my own inner, this is interesting to me and it's a vanity project and this is really cool. And I'll just sort of start going. And that is a beautiful and a problematic thing at the same time. And so is the opposite, because if you're right, if you are just writing something to pitch for others, you are thinking in the commercial sense of what is there a demand that needs to be filled for, not
or who's the average gamer that I'm trying to reach or something, right?
Or if it's not the average gamer, who am I trying to reach? You need to take that into account if sales are what you're going for, or, that sort of thing. If you're a bigger commercial business, it makes a heck of a lot of sense. I think if you are a small independent creator, you kind of need to tie the vanity project together with what are people interested in and how do I pitch this to them?
Yeah, go ahead.
Better to start with the vanity side of it and then move on to, is there an arena for this out there and how am I going to sell in this is actually worthwhile to someone who is not me? And maybe it's not.
Yeah. Well, the thing too is that if you think of, well, it may not be for everybody, but it's certainly for people who can at least get turned on by it, like I'm turned on by it, then I think that's a nice way to think about it. But I want to focus on the transition that you just talked about, which is that of actually, I've been cautioning people, don't make that shift too early. You have some final late stage playtesting to do with some serious design considerations that need to be done. And what I often talk about in a game that's built to be played for a really long time, it's hardly ever play tested for the late stages, just logistically, because few groups ever get there. And so you see sort of a drop off in the quality of the design relative to how long the game is supposed to be played, just because the experience with that later stage is so minimal.
It's kind of what you see with video games sometimes that are, crowdsourced, where they hit that last stride and the very ending is rushed, and even movies.
Yeah, movies for sure. Yeah.
That's a big problem with creative industries. Just the strong punch at the front and then sort of the fiddling out.
Well, especially because they've shifted into production, promotion, and all of the logistics of getting it out there as a product as their top priority too soon. One of the interesting things about movies that comes to mind is since the shots can be made out of sequence, what you'll see in a lot of modern movies is that the big eye candy action sequences were all done first. And that's where all the creative effort went. And then all of the glue plot to put them all together is the part that falls down.
Yeah, you sort of get hills and valleys or plot holes.
Absolutely. Yeah. So anyway, though, with a role-playing game, writing it is another weird thing. And this is something else I've been thinking about a lot in the last couple of years, and I'm still struggling with this. I want to know what you think about, because I think this really applies to your work and your thinking so far that I know about, which is this. Let's take something that is intended to be a usable text for reference and use while you do the thing. You know the thing pretty well, but it's very nice to have this book here. And it needs to have stuff in it that, given that you know it already, you do need to reference it. And it's a good thing to have around. That's very different from a game or from a text which teaches you how to do it when you don't know.
I feel like you really need both. You definitely need a learning device, basically, and you need a reference.
And one book is hard to do. You can't do it in one book. Or at least if you can, I haven't. Sorry. No, go on.
Well, and some of them need to be more one or the other. I mean, you can always have like a rules reference section and then another chunk completely separate from that mostly is about teaching how to play the game.
Yeah.
And even, like a bestiary is like an encyclopedia as opposed to a core book, which is teaching you more how to play, but also, making rules ideally easy to find, simple to explain.
Sounds so. I mean, I like the look on your face right now because you're saying, "Yeah, it would be beautiful." Oh God, how am I possibly going to do this? And that's how I feel. It's my take with Trollbabe, which you had mentioned before before you recorded. It was sort of where you were going, or what was on your mind. I said to myself for that second writing, which is, I know exactly what I'm doing. I'm going to walk a person procedurally through what to do, and I'm going to explain it only as much as is conversationally necessary. And I'm going to let all of the tertiary connections that can occur during play take care of themselves at their own table.
Yeah, which had a really nice sort of flow to it and was quick and easy to read.
Yeah.
I haven't gotten through the entirety of it, but there are some really interesting ideas that I'm like, I'm going to use this in my game.
Awesome. Thank you. What matters for me with it is that all the way through, my touch point was, is this, when a person reads this bit, will they say, okay, I wasn't sure what to do or what he thought, was the way to do this, but now I know. And then move on. And that's kind of what I've done with a couple. I mean, ever since I've thought very much in those terms. I've also thought very much in terms of what, through the course of playtesting, I have what I call the living document. And the living document isn't the intended publication. That's actually really important. The living document is not the intended publication. But what it is each time I rewrite A, what I think the rules are, and B, what I just told the last playtest. This is how I talked when I sat down. This is, how am I going to explain the way to roll the dice? Well, whatever it was I told them, this is what I said. And so the living document does that. And sometimes I'm saying, oh, by the way I told them this last time, I'm not going to use that. That was ass. Right. So instead, I'll go back to the one before. Yeah.
Had this unintended effect. Yeah.
Right. And so then but anyway, so the living document is a really, really nice record and thought platform and sort of bouncy thought platform of how this is done and how this is told. So then I find when I sit down and I say, okay, I'm going to write the real text. I'm actually going to try to start from scratch. But every single time I explain something, I go back to what ultimately happened in the living document. And I lift that and stick it in. I don't come up with a new way to explain how to do things for purposes of publication when I know the way that I ultimately did it, that I started relying on, is sound.
Now, I find one of the tricky things with all of this is if you have not just one playtest group, but 2 or 3, you can get radically different responses to different things. And even from individual to individual, you kind of reconciling that. Yeah,
this is something I talked about a bit ago. Earlier this year, I did a series, a design, sort of one-on-one design seminar with an interested person. And we talked about the publication side of it at the end a little bit, but I said some very unorthodox things about playtesting at that point. And this one's going to sound horrible, which is that there is a while during playtesting when I basically either tell people, don't tell me, I don't care. Or I say, and basically none of it's really going anywhere. Now, there are some exceptions, specific people with whom I have such a knowledge of interacting with that I know that they're already thinking of saying it in ways, they're already on my side, if you will, right? When they're talking, or they're already in tune, they know where I'm at, and so they're able to sort of help me from inside my own head. But a lot of people, though, I'm not interested in what they think. It sounds awful. I'm interested in what happened at the table. Because what they think is actually some processy thing that they do later, or some hyper-reactive thing that may not actually be very helpful. In fact, usually, I'll be really blunt, it isn't. The tendency for people to elevate themselves into cultural critic or co-author just because they're at the playtesting table is really, really strong. And I find that to be both, it crosses a boundary for me. And it is also, I think, even if it didn't, I think that would be bad because it's not actually very helpful. And
because it's people, I assume, to observe what they're doing than what they're going to say about what they're doing.
Right. And not only that, but they don't know where what we did at the table, they don't know where it stands relative to the development. Maybe some of those things were spitballed. Maybe some of those things were heartfelt. Maybe some of those are very important for the design. Maybe some of those were a little, well, let's try it this way. What I observed bluntly at Metatopia when I went a few years ago, I thought that the over-processing and, frankly, close to bullying of first-time designers. I mean, you really shouldn't have an encounter group with somebody after one playtest of their game. Right? You were a playtester in one session at some phase of development. Don't call yourself the guru who's going to lead the encounter session about whether this is any good and why and what they should change, right? I mean, that doesn't seem right to me at all. Does that make any sense?
No, it makes sense.
Yeah.
There's a part of me that really wants that feedback, but observation skills, because people, again, they'll really interact with things a certain way and they'll say something different about them. Like, and it worked.
And then, of course, there's the flip side, too. When is it good to be humble enough to accept the ugly truth?
Oh, for sure.
But it's really tricky. Yeah, I have too. And it's really tricky, though, to know when, because you could say just as authoritatively or just as intensely, stick to your guns, man. Your game. Stick to your guns. And yet, so when is it a sacred cow and when is it your moment of genius? How do you tell the difference, right? So
it's tough. I guess that comes back to observation again.
What happens at the table?
Really, really mess things up at the table. It has to go.
Yeah.